Good morning, everybody. Here we are again with our Kuntres Bikkur Chicago, Touching a City Soul. We are currently learning the first maamer in the Sefer, and we are on page 52. We're at the last paragraph of page 52, and we're going to continue to page 53. So just to give us a short recap, we left off by... Obviously, we're having a whole discussion, a longer discussion as a part of the entire maamer about feeding and sustaining our emunah. This whole concept of, really it's the whole concept of when you live with bitachon and you do good things, you get a tranquil life and you are fed emunah. You live off of your emunah. And so we're trying to understand this, and we went into a whole discussion about why there is bitachon before it comes to emunah. And it led us to like a whole discussion about on the one hand, the emunah seems like it's something that's simple. What do you mean? Believe in God. Belief. You have faith. You believe that God makes you. You believe that God exists. Like, that's it. Easy, simple. Just think about it, talk about it, and then, it ignites a spark inside of you. On the other hand, the Rebbe Rashab gives a whole explanation, and in it he says that emunah needs to be increased and grown and fed and sustained and cared for and all of these different things, and it kind of leaves us a little, one second, so we have to understand this concept deeply, a little bit more deeply, to understand what does it mean to feed and sustain your emunah. So then we went into a discussion about feeding and sustaining ourselves. What does that actually mean? It means we take something that's external from us, such as food or drinks, and we intake it. Hopefully the healthier the better. So hopefully when we intake it, it does this miraculous thing where such a gashmi is low. Any food that we eat is obviously lower than human. Baruch Hashem, we don't eat humans. So therefore we're not eating something that has a neshama like we are, but something that's of a lower spiritual stature is actually feeding and sustaining us. And not just that, but it's connecting our neshama to our guf. And it's this miraculous thing that we eat something that's a lower spiritual status, but it gives us this boost of bonding our neshama to our guf. And so too, we can understand, now that we can understand that eating and feeding and sustaining us, eating connects and makes this neshama concept, more alive in our bodies. And it keeps our neshama and our body bonded together. So too, we can understand, as a mashal, so to speak, what does it mean to feed and sustain our emunah? Now, our second ice, we went to a beautiful discussion about Moshe Rabbeinu and how Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama is exactly perfect and pristine. There are two types of neshamas. There's a neshama that comes down to this world to refine and to elevate and to raise up the nefesh of Bahamas, and to refine, elevate, and raise up the body, right? So our bodies, what do they want to do on a Sunday morning? They want to sleep in extra late. Or what do we want to do? Sometimes they want to take a lazy Sunday, as I spoke about last week, right? But in reality, our neshama comes and tells us, 1 second, Sunday for most people is a time when they don't have to work in the set schedule that they usually have during the week. Now is a beautiful opportunity to do even more of what you really are here to do, which is learn more Torah, add in your davening, maybe slow down a little bit so you can actually take some time to daven, maybe, spend that quality time with your family. Now is a beautiful time to do your shlichus and really instill your family with the beautiful values of Torah. So again, Sunday is this open space, so to speak, that you have this opportunity to do more. But there's a contradiction, so to speak, between our neshama, our nefesh elokis, and what the nefesh Bahamas / the body do. So there's certain souls that come here to come and the neshama should come and raise and educate the nefesh Bahamas and educate the body and say, no, let's not just waste our day. Let's do something beautiful with it, right? On the other hand, there are certain neshamas that are already perfect. The body doesn't need any sort of elevation. It already wants to do what Hashem wants it to do. The nefesh Bahamas is not it's not wild and untamed. The nefesh Bahamas is perfect. It already wants to exactly. It's another chariot for Hashem's message to the world, right? So it also, the Nefesh Bahamis itself wants to get up and do good things and wants to fulfill the will of Hashem during that day. So for those neshamas, what are they here for? If they weren't brought down to elevate the body and the Nefesh Bahamis, so what are they here for? Why do we need them? Why are they here? So we explain in the maamer that they come here specifically to help us, to help the rest of us who do deal with this struggle between the two nefashis, right? To help inspire and give us a boost of emunah, give us a boost of inspiration and guide us in all of these beautiful things. So we went into this discussion that Moshe's neshama, that was from its essence, and again, I think tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, I'm going to try and do like a bit more of a discussion on what does that actually mean, that it's push it in the essence, like the Moshe's, the essence of Moshe's neshama, all the way tracing it back to Atzilus. And again, Atzilus is this like half existing, non-existing thing. Like Atzilus is this like the first concept of existence beyond or after, so to speak, after infinity. So that piece is exactly perfect and pristine, even though throughout the worlds, what do the worlds do in regards to Seder Shtalshus? Those worlds turn this infiniteness into a finite existence. And that neshama went through that entire process without being changed whatsoever. And we left off with this comparison, so to speak, between the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is perfect and pristine, and the neshama of Avram Avinu. And again, we are in no way, shape, or form, and I hope everybody took some time to review Epistle 15 over Shabbos. If not, please go today and listen to Rabbi Gordon's shir on it. I'm pretty sure it's specifically part 2 that we're talking about here. But the point is not whatsoever to put down Avram. I mean, we even said it in the maamer that Avram Avinu is a chariot. He is a full chariot to the Eibishter, which means the Eibishter says jumps, he jumped. For us, not necessarily, I mean, I'll speak for myself. The Eibishter says jump, and I have to think about it. I have to, learn some Chassidus about it. And I mean, I'm working on myself. In Mitzvah Hashem, the Eibishter says jump, and I jump. But again, this level of chesed, this level of bond and connection that Avram Avinu had to Hashem is just, it's incredible. But with all that, we can even appreciate how much higher it must have been the source of his neshama, that he himself, Avram himself, says that I am dust in comparison. He doesn't say the words in comparison, but I am dust. So we can appreciate that how much more so, if this is Avram's chesed went above and beyond, Avram's neshama went above and beyond, how much more amazing, how much greater it must be his soul, the source of his neshama, all the way up in its source, right? And meanwhile, Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama comes straight through without ever, without making any slight of a change throughout the entire process of Seder Shtalshus. So again, we're not putting down Avram. Avram is amazing and incredible, and it helps us through Avram. We're able to appreciate how incredible, the source of his neshama must be, because down here, what he considers afar, what he considers, just dust and ashes, that in of itself is incredible. So imagine, the comparison. Now we're going to continue on. And we're going to appreciate the intense spirituality that we're dealing with when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama, and how that affects us by connecting to Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, so here we are, page 52, the bottom, starting with the word nevertheless. So nevertheless, one might have assumed that the middos of Avram's soul were the same quality and type as the supernal middos. This is why he said, I am dust and ashes. For ashes are the essence and substance of the burnt wood. For the wood was previously composed of the 4 basic elements: fire, air, water, and earth, of which all matter is compounded, right? So every single thing in the world is created with the combination of those. Question is, how much of each? The three elements of fire, water, and air were vaporized and discharged in the smoke that is created by their combination, as is known, right? So I remember I told you guys, when you light Shabbos candles, take a moment to look at the wood. I hope you did. You'll see that there's teeny tiny little bits of like, kind of like this weird liquid that's like, where do you come from? You don't feel it. But it's that water that's essentially inside the wood that's actually coming off. The fourth element of the wood, namely its component of earth, sinks downward. Fire has no dominion over it because it isn't combustible. It is the component that remains in existence and constitutes the ashes. The whole of being of the wood, its tangible substance, its matter, and its form in terms of length, width, and density, which was visible to the eye before it was burned, derived primarily from the element of earth within it. It is only that the element of fire, water, and air were also compounded with it. For earth is the most material of all elements, having dimensions of length, width, and density, unlike fire and air, right? So what made up the biggest chunk, so to speak, the biggest percentage of that piece of wood was the element of fire. Was the element of earth. The element of earth. And earth has weight, length, depth, density, all of these things. Earth has that. But fire, you can't quite measure that. You can't quite measure that with air either. Thus, all the dimensions of wood of length, width, and density, all of the earth and all is of the earth, and all returns to earth. This refers to the ash that remains after the fire, water, and air have been separated from it. The ash has no resemblance or comparison to the substance of the large tree with its dimensions of length, width, and density before being burnt, not in quantity or in quality, even though it, meaning the ashes, is the very substance of the wood from which it came into being. Similarly, metaphorically speaking, okay, so one second, let's take a moment before we jump into the metaphor. So the wood, what we're saying is wood was made up of fire, water, air, and earth. Primarily earth. Everything else, it's much smaller. It's much more, quote unquote, minuscule, but it is there. And once fire comes and touches wood, what does it do? It takes away, it burns out the oxygen inside the wood. That's one of the reasons why if you take, fire needs oxygen. If you take, something on top of a candle and you close up the oxygen source, it's not going to, it dies off because it needs that oxygen. So here it's getting fed oxygen from primarily, also from the aspect of the wood, what oxygen that's in the wood, the fire that's in the wood, and the water that's in the wood. So all those things get burnt off when the fire touches it, and all that's mainly left primarily is the earth aspect of the wood. And so those things are missing, and that's such a huge separation when you actually take a look at a tree that's planted, let's say, or even just a piece of wood that's not planted anymore. The comparison between that and ashes, you can see that it's a very large comparison. Similarly, metaphorically speaking, our patriarch Avram spoke of his distinctive attribute, the attribute of chesed, kindness, and love, which radiated within him and was vested in his body. True, it was the very attribute of love and supernal chesed of Atzilus that radiates in his soul, which was a chariot, in other words, a channel and medium for the will of heaven with no sense of self. So Avram Avinu's chesed was so great that it was literally, it was a chariot. He was literally a channel and medium for Hashem's will. Nevertheless, as it descended downwards to vest itself in the body, by means of progressive descent of the worlds from one level to another, by way of many contractions, right, through each and every one of the worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, Bria, Yasiya, through each and every one, it went through a sort of contraction. It has to go through a process to become vested in a body down here. There remains no resemblance. So even though because it went through that entire process, there remains no resemblance or comparison between the nature of the light of the love that radiated within Avram and the nature of the light of the love of the supernal chesed of Atzilus. The comparison and resemblance between them is merely like that which exists between substance of the element of earth, which became ashes, and the substance and quality which is in its original state as a tree, pleasant to see and good for food, metaphorically speaking. Indeed, the incomparability of Avram's chesed and the chesed of Atzilus exceeds the incomparability of ashes and tree by thousands of degrees of separation. Nevertheless, the Torah speaks in human phraseology by way of allegory and metaphor. Hence, it uses the analogy of ashes despite its inherent disproportion. The above analogy explains the difference between the souls of Avram and Moshe. The radiance of Avram's soul below and the root of his soul above are not in the same category. Therefore, Avram, Avram, is read with a pause in the cantillation, since the soul of Avram above in Atzilus is not comparable to the soul of Avram in the lower worlds of Bria, Yetzia, and Asiya. Okay? So, what are we saying? We're saying that Avram, to such an extent that he represented the full, he represented chesed in this world. It was vested, and it was fully vested in his body. But even Avram, in such an incredibly high level, he was a chariot. He literally did exactly as Hashem wanted, and Hashem's will was his will. And such a great and powerful Avram, still his neshama, in comparison to what it means to be an Atzilus. And again, we're going to discuss, check the time, Atzilus is that initial step from the difference between, infinity, like there is nothing separate from the Eibusher, it just is Hashem. Imagine you take a bucket, and you have not even a bucket, you take a full, ginormous amount of Play-Doh. Okay, so imagine this Play-Doh is infinity. And in that Play-Doh, you make a hole, that kav, and from that hole, you make a separate space, right? It's the, not kav, it's the makom panoi. So you make that separate space in the Play-Doh. Then you take the same Play-Doh and you have to reintroduce it, but this time you have to introduce it into separate, in a whole progression, to the point that the same Play-Doh now becomes separate entities. And that same Play-Doh becomes, shaped into a chair. That same Play-Doh becomes shaped into a house. That same Play-Doh becomes shaped into a human. That same Play-Doh becomes shaped into an animal, right? So that's what we're doing here. But in reality, this first step of turning that Play-Doh, which is still infinity, it's still Hashem's infiniteness, into finiteness, that's Atzilus, or Keser, but again, it leads into Atzilus. So Atzilus is that first world, but isn't really a world. So Avram's soul power, the chesed of Atzilus, which is this in between infinity and finitude, that still goes through a procession to come down and become the soul of Avram. And so therefore there is a huge difference between that, chetzi infinity, chetzi finitude, finiteness. There's a progression, there's a separate, it's very different to see Avram's neshama as it is invested in Avram's body, as opposed to the essence of neshama above. But meanwhile, Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama goes through that entire process without being changed. It is exactly as it was, this half infinity, half finitude, finiteness, goes straight through without a single change. And so we're going to learn tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, just checking on the time, Mitzvah Hashem, tomorrow in Ois Gimel, we're going to learn what does it mean and what difference does it make? Okay, so Avram's neshama, how amazing was Avram's neshama that even though it had a change in progression throughout the entire Seder Shtalshus, but it still was the epitome of chesed in this world. It's incredible. So why do we need something, so to speak, different? Why do we need Moshe's? What difference does it make that Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama was exactly pristine? If Avram's neshama was perfect, he was a perfect chariot. Mitzvah Hashem, we should strive to be chariots like Avram. We should strive to reach the level of Avram. And that in of itself is the difference between ashes and a tree. right? So why is it? What's the big deal? What are we supposed to gain? What are we supposed to learn from the fact that Moshe's neshama was perfectly pristine even throughout the entire process? And that's tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to learn about the difference between the two neshamas and what does it do for us that Moshe's neshama is straight through. It's perfect and pristine and goes straight down. I know it's a little early. Okay, fine. So I'll answer this question since I know I have 2 more minutes. So the question was, I'm confused about the tree mashal and how it connects to the nimshal. So the same way as when you look at a tree and you look at ashes, it's incomparable. Once a tree gets burnt, once you take that match that you lit your Shabbos candles with and you put it next to a tree, there's no comparison. Why? Because everything is gone from it, so to speak. Everything except the last bit, so to speak, of earth. You burnt out the fire in it, you burnt out the water in it, and you burnt out the oxygen from it. And so therefore, there's no comparison between a tree to its ashes once after it's burnt. And so to here, we're saying that there's no comparison between the tree, so to speak, which is the essence of Avram's neshama as it is in Atzilus. That is a tree. And meanwhile, it goes through this whole process that it becomes, so to speak, like ashes. And it's funny because, like, if somebody were to give you a gift, you'd rather them give you a piece of tree than a piece of ash, right? Because ashes is like, what is this? But how much more so we can appreciate that even though Avram's neshama down here is, so to speak, like ashes in comparison to his source of his neshama, Avram's ashes were good ashes. They were chariot ashes. They were the source of Chesed's ashes. It's incredible. It's an incredibly high level. So again, we're not putting down Avram. What we're saying is, imagine if Avram's ashes were a chariot for Hashem, if Avram's ashes were something we strive, we hope to someday, be able to even try and attempt to be like Avram's ashes, so to speak. Imagine and take a moment to appreciate how incredible it must be, the essence of his neshama that is a tree in comparison to the ashes. Does that make sense? Okay, I hope that's a yes. Anyway, I can't wait to see you guys tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, as we continue this incredible maamer. Just wait, it's good and it's gonna get even better. So see you guys tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem.